Hello, everyone, and welcome back to CLI's Legalpreneurs Spotlight Future 50 series. In this series, we're showcasing thought leaders and doers in legal innovation, legal tech, and AI all around the world. Today, I'm joined by the wonderful Mark Williams, who is the founding co-director at Vanderbilt AI Law Lab and a professor of practice of law at AIGP as well. Mark's background is amazing. He's had a career that started in journalism and now finds him deep into legal AI. And we're going to find out in just a second how all of those dots got connected. But first, Mark, thanks so much for joining me today. I know it's a little bit later in the day in Nashville, so I do really appreciate it.
Oh, no, thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to the discussion.
I've got to start at the beginning because I am absolutely fascinated about how you get a start in journalism, and somehow you become the co-founding director of Vanderbilt AI Law Lab. So tell us, how did that happen?
It is, I was thinking about this the other day, even before this question came up, of kind of the winding path that if you were to look at it on a piece of paper, doesn't feel like it should be all related. But then when I think about it, like the things that I'm good at, the strengths that I've learned along the way, it all makes sense. It all adds up. But it didn't seem like that, in the moment. It's only looking back on it that makes sense. So, I had an undergraduate degree in journalism, but worked part-time during that time. My college job was as a journalist as well, both for our college newspaper, and then I was doing a lot of sports reporting then. So I would work part-time for the local newspaper to do sports games, sports write-ups. Went to law school. I graduated in law school in 2008, which was about the worst possible time to graduate and come onto the legal market. And I went to a regional school here in the States, University of Idaho, which was a great school. Loved law school, but yeah, for people like me, the legal market wasn't exactly booming with the biggest economic crash since the history, since the Great Depression. Had through my contacts previously an opportunity to go back and do journalism for a little bit. So I just like, well, I need a job and the world's crashing down, so I'm going to take this job. And through that, I really honed in and a lot of the things that I'm good at now, just taking complex topics and distilling them down for audiences that need a general understanding and doing so succinctly. So just a lot of repetitions at that. And a lot of variety of different topics. So it taught me to be nimble. I also was, firsthand observing the impact that, for both good and ill, that the internet was having on print journalism. So just when I first got to my journalism job, the newspaper was very much still conceived of as a static newspaper. We had an online presence, but it was really, you would take that day's newspaper and put it online, and that's what you did. By the time I left, that website, we were breaking news on the website, more active. You could see the internet sort of maturing into, so social media was maturing, what it was coming into. Everything was starting to change from that, 2008 to 2010, sort of that wet 2.0 phase. And I professionally saw that. And that put me, again, in this sort of era now where generative AI is taking over and potentially transforming knowledge work. In a lot of ways, I had already just had a lot of repetitions of having my professional identity be disrupted by technology in some way. Another way I could think about it too is when we would often go on the scene. We couldn't always have a photographer, or couldn't always have somebody to help take video. When I first started in that job, they would call it the point and click. They'd give you a little digital camera to send you on the way. Or we even had these little, I forget what they're called, but they were little mini video cameras, really. And you would go out there, because the phones at that time, even the Blackberries, they weren't doing what an iPhone does now. By the time I left that job, you just use your phone. You just use your phone. Yeah. and so I just got used to, very early on in that period of time, those kind of changes and adapting to that, and having a mindset of curiosity and not shying away from those things. From there, I went on and worked in a political job for a little while. And even that too, like, we lost an election, 2 years later. My candidate that I worked for has the distinction of being the first candidate to concede a race on Twitter.
Wow. The dots were starting to emerge then by the sounds of it.
Yeah. So even the technology was, changing and disrupting things, uh, and social media was really starting again to form into what it was going to become. From there, I went into, because I already had a law degree, and I had always loved sort of the research aspect of the law. I became a law librarian. Started at Cornell, and then moved on to Vanderbilt. But the thing is that you'll often find, at least in the States, I'm sure this is true elsewhere, that often that law and technology intersect. You usually find somebody in the knowledge management library profession is there. And I'd always been a tinkerer and curious about technology, but that's where it really started to set me on the path that I'm on now, where we started teaching up law practice technology at Cornell. My colleague and kind of mentor, Femi Cadmus at Cornell, launched one of the first ones in the country, 2013, 2014. Now everybody has a version of that. But I got to be in the early stages of developing courses like that, and then sort of took that on and developed my own, including here at Vanderbilt. And through that, I'd always had an AI unit in those courses. Like, you'd have that one 2-hour unit on AI, and then it was more traditional machine learning topics, predictive like that, in the early days. But when I got here to Vanderbilt, around 2018, 2019, I would bring in data scientists from on campus here at Vanderbilt, and they would start showing early versions of these models. Google had one of the first ones, GPT-1, GPT-2, and they would be kind of fun to play around with for our students. They were just kind of a neat party trick. Like, if they answered one question coherently, that was really impressive. But you weren't going to go back down that. Certainly going to hold a conversation with it, and it wasn't going to answer anything particularly sophisticated. November 2022 happens, and ChatGPT comes out. I am getting ready for my January 2023 law practice technology course. And our students had gone away for a month. Basically, they wrap up this finals in early December. They go home, they come back, we're getting ready to teach that course. And I just have my, one unit on AI, but it was just clear that in that month, like the rest of the world, they had been playing around. And it became clear in that moment that this couldn't just be one unit. This was now an AI course, whether I liked it or not. And from then on, that kind of set us on a path. My co-director, Kat Moon, I think, had some similar experiences in her courses. Our dean, Chris Guthrie, who's always been very forward-looking about law and technology initiatives, had also been thinking about some of these things too. And we started thinking about proactively, what can we do in this space to both equip our students, equip our faculty to be proactive leaders of the profession in an academic setting, to get in front of this and to understand it. And that kind of set us on the path, from that point forward to what eventually became the lab. So that's a long way from me being a journalist to that's how it happened in the short form.
But as you say, you can see kind of almost those mobile skills around kind of entrepreneurship and resilience and, all of those sort of things coming through in your career. So I can see how all of that is being really well directed into the lab. And speaking of which, let me jump into that. And guess probably a broader and then a narrower question in a way, but I've been actually following the work of your law school for a while, and I think you mentioned Kat Noon, and obviously she's been a fantastic ambassador for Vanderbilt, and where a lot of us, I guess, have initially connected with the school. But I have to say, and I just have to pay this compliment, that it's really been inspiring to watch how the law school has embraced, technology and more broadly what's transforming in the legal ecosystem. But brought that and found, really innovative and different ways to bring that to educating future generations. But I have to ask you this question, because there's so much stuff bubbling up at Vanderbilt Law School, and it's still unique. I mean, what you're doing, the depth and breadth of what you're doing is still quite unique. I want to know, is there some kind of secret sauce, that we can all tap into and that we can all manufacture? What's different about VLS from other universities, I guess?
I don't know if it really does just comes from the top down. I have to give a lot of credit to our dean, Chris Guthrie, because we didn't need to ask for buy-in. Buy-in came from the very top. And when you have somebody who is that strong of a believer, it really clears out a lot. Because in a lot of ways, Vanderbilt Law School operates as a very traditional law school, just as any others do. But we also have this sort of path that we do as well, that both things can exist and complement each other, and you can have we need both. But it really is a big credit to our dean. I think even with Kat and previously the program and all the law and innovation that they had done previously, and this is our AI lab is housed within that program. It really was spring of 2023. ChatGPT had been out for a few months. GPT-4 had come out, which was a big leap from before. Our dean in May of that year had us do basically a 6-hour workshop over the course of 2 weeks for our law faculty. And so this isn't going to be recorded. You need to come in person. And we're going to all just kind of learn what this is. Without that kind of buy-in, and he's the person sitting right up front, being the cheerleader. So if there is the secret sauce, it's just that we seem to, and at higher levels of Vanderbilt University as well, everybody just seems to be all in and exploring both the positive and potential risk, use cases of generative AI and AI in general. So if there is a secret sauce, it's that. It's just that a lot of things that are hard elsewhere have not been hard here because we didn't have to advocate. We were being advocated for.
You're right. I mean, I think it's across the board, isn't it? It's that visionary leadership in a way that becomes infectious as well as inspiring. But I love that you have all gone through some sort of, I'm going to call it an upskilling. Maybe it's a skilling because some of it was so new, right? But that kind of program, because I just think, as academics, it's really difficult to deliver or understand a context if you haven't kind of played in the technology yourself, right?
That's right. Yeah. It's so foreign to when you first encounter a technology like this. And we all kind of have that first time you play with it. And, because people want to try to use it like a database, and I was no different. And so I discovered, this case it gave to me wasn't real. But I was, I was still, I knew that was going to happen because I understood it was a probabilistic system, not a deterministic system. And there are other ways of working with it that make it unique. It's not a database. But it is, I'll never forget those early days when we would show people things, and people who are pretty tech averse and probably pretty skeptical. I'll never forget the gasps in the room when we started showing them some of the questions it could answer and the level at which it could answer them. That'll stick with me for a long time.
And I think it's what's compelling about that tech. It's kind of fun, but it's easy to use, and you're getting like immediate response, right?
Yeah, I was describing this to our alums a couple weeks ago. It's really the first time that just your average person can reach out and touch and interact with a truly high-powered AI system in that way, and know that you're doing it. So, Google has their AlphaFold, or DeepMind has AlphaFold, and that just won the Nobel Prize. But to understand what that AI system really achieved, you probably need to know a lot more about protein folding to really understand what it had done. Whereas this, you could just reach out and touch it, and and we all understand words, we all understand text, and yeah, there is a certain wow factor that comes with that. That for a lot of us, it was the first time to encounter that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me kind of narrow the discussion slightly, but to something near and dear to your heart, of course, the AI Lab. Look, it's an amazing initiative, but I do want to kind of, if you can, cover the A to Z of all of this. So, why did you start it? What does it do? Who's involved with it? What are you hoping to achieve with it? And anything in between that you want to tell us.
Yeah. So there's really, I think, three big components that complement each other but are also distinct. And the lab was really born out of those early days of those workshops that we had done with our faculty over the summer. We had formed a working group and kind of, so how do we institutionalize this? How do we sort of carry this forward to bring this to our students? And so it consists of curricular activities, so building out a curriculum that kind of says to students that you come to Vanderbilt, you'll understand the nuts and bolts of how these systems work, how to use them, their impact on knowledge work, and what it means to be a legal professional. But we also, and the lab is more focused on that, AI for law aspect, the legal services delivery aspect. But we also have experts here in the policy realm as well of frameworks for thinking about how these things are going to be regulated over time, what are the ethical implications. So building a kind of a through line platform. You come to Vanderbilt, you will know the basics all the way to the more existential policy implications and everything in between. And the lab is focused on more of that first part. So we have a curriculum. I teach a sort of tentpole, we call it 100 level course called AI and Legal Practice. And that covers everything I kind of just talked about, but in a very sort of surface level detail. But it is, especially in these early days, and it will be interesting to see how this evolves over time. The students just have a real thirst of just using these tools and want to learn how to use them the best way possible. So it is a lot of prompt engineering practice and techniques and strategies for thinking, which is really, and I say this as somebody who has online courses about prompt engineering. Prompt engineering, that term is probably overused, and I may be passe here in the not too distant future, but really just about like good communication. Like, think about if you're giving your assistant or intern or new hire a set of instructions, how well can that assistant do if you haven't given it a series of steps for them to follow in the back and rows it needs to complete the task? That's really what we're talking about. But for now, we're calling it prompt engineering. And so for lack of a better term, that's what we do. So in these early days, so much of it is just the basics education around that, what these systems are, how they're different from other types of tools they may have used in the past. And then we delve into a little bit of, the ethical and legal frameworks as well there. We also have what we call a practicum, which is a smaller course. And that is kind of our version of the clinic. And there is truly like the lab, where the lab component lives, where we build things, design things. The main tool we're working on right now, we have an end-of-life planning AI system that we're working on, and another tool that's more of a sort of that's basically a chat bot that stays like, here's all the resources we recommend people look at to learn how to get started with AI and build a RAG system so people can access that. I've got a few other projects I'm working on as well. But even in the AI and legal practice course, the projects, the outputs that the students do are designed around building. And that's one of the incredible things about this technology is you can learn a lot by just building. And even a year ago, that was much harder to do than it is today. But it turns out, whether it's in that practicum or AI and legal practice, that you learn a lot about the subject that you're building on. And so yeah, I had students in my class design custom tools for estate planning, for IP, for federal disaster relief. And it turns out you actually have to learn a lot about like wills, trusts, and estates in order to design a tool responsibly. And so I would have them go through and say, what kind of tone does your system have? What are the 2 to 3 scenarios it can handle when somebody asks it? And how are you going to ensure that it doesn't go outside of those scenarios and say, I can only answer questions like this. I'm not allowed to answer questions like that. How are you going to develop a framework to evaluate its output for groundedness, for clarity, for tone? And along that way, you can also learn about concepts like, well, what is retrieval augmented generation? Well, you're going to do it. You're going to throw some documents in there. You're going to just strategically design those. Things that this time last year I would have to kind of talk to my students about, like, retrieval augmented generation is this, fine tuning is this, but don't worry about that. Like that, only the most technically proficient people and the most well-funded people are able to do those things. Now we just go and do them. And I was almost kind of apologetic to my students. Like, don't worry if the tool you built doesn't work. What I care about is in your report to me that you reflect on why it did or didn't work. And it actually, most of the tools work much better than I thought they would. But learning through building is one of the through lines in those courses. And then we have a few other courses as well that we're trying to build into more of a concentration. Again, kind of talking about that, you understand everything from A to Z as far as how to use them and the policy implications. So, but those are the 2 first things that we really launched. And then, so yeah, that lab component where it's building. And then the other part we do is a lot of external outreach and education, workshops for attorneys, for trade groups, for judges. We just had a big reunion weekend here a couple of weeks ago. We did a couple of presentations there. And we're just finding that there's still no shortage of places to go to talk about the basics. At some point, I hope to move beyond the basics into some of the more fun stuff. And I try to evolve the conversation a little bit. But still, I find that a lot of the audiences we talk to, there's still such a newness and foreignness to what these things are that I spend a lot of time talking about that. Because generative AI, somebody else said this, but I really struck with it. It's like AI in that form is really, we discovered it. We didn't invent it. And so we observe its sort of outputs as we would almost like a naturally occurring weather system, not
Yes. Yeah.
and as opposed to other forms of computer codes that you can kind of evaluate on a straight line. This doesn't behave that way because we don't fully understand it ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's new and weird and a little scary, but also thrilling. And so those are the 3 sort of components: education, inward at this, in the universe, in the school, building, designing, experimenting, and then outward education as well.
And you've got some great education courses, I know, on Coursera, I believe. Yes. Got some there. I know I've signed up for them. I haven't taken them yet, Mark, but I promise I will. But they look fantastic as well. So, yeah, it's just so important to get that foundational knowledge at the very least, as far and wide as you possibly can. I wanted to kind of morph into that a little bit and kind of looking at that, the broader impact in a way in terms of education and literacy. And we do see these terms, digital and data literacy, used a lot, and they have tended to mean different things to different people. So as you think about that, and I guess in the context of AI in legal practice, probably more outside in a way than inside, but also looking at the lab and what you're doing at the law school, what do those terms mean to you? What does digital and data literacy actually mean to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. Even to me, I feel like maybe that's evolved a little bit over time, and everybody has a little bit different meaning. But it will be interesting over the next few years because you're seeing what's with the EU AI Act and other rules started to come out that literacy requirements are in the laws, and so we're going to have like very specific meanings about what some of these things mean. But even before generative AI came along, I would always have components of this in my law practice technology course of just understanding kind of the life cycle of a piece of data, the chain of custody, what are the pressure points, is people, even if you describe yourself as not a computer person, like as a knowledge worker going into a large law firm, which most of our students will do, you are a computer person, whether you like it or not. And you, as part of your core competency in the United States, we have ABA, the American Bar Association has sort of Rule 1.1, which is sort of defines attorney competencies, and Comment 8 of that has a technology requirement of the technology is not, or your ignorance of technology is not an excuse. You have to be competent in this to be a proficient lawyer. But I talk to my students all the time. Your firm is only as secure as the worst person in your firm. And so everybody has to be vigilant on this. And you don't have to come out of it being a data scientist, but you really do owe it to yourself as a curious professional to understand how things come into your purview, how they go out, what the license agreements say, and that whole life cycle. And there's a lot of good resources to do that abstract away the more technical pieces. Not everybody needs to be ISO certified or SOC 2 certified, but you need to know what those things mean in a broad sense, and look for them when you're contracting with vendors for your own things, when you're talking about with your clients. Yeah, a lot of the questions I actually get about generative AI have turned into being a great talking point to pivot into this. It's like, your question really isn't about generative AI. What you're asking me about is a software licensing question. You should have been asking that already.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But what's also coming through, and I think this is true for the context of your lab, is just this increasing importance of seeing a skill set that is multidisciplinary and drawing on a skill set that is multidisciplinary. Because I think your students in the lab are not just law students, right? They come from...
Right. Yeah. I think that is one of my primary sort of things going forward, and not just at the law school, but at Vanderbilt in general. We're launching a college of connected computing, and that's meant to be kind of an interdisciplinary collaboration. And especially in this realm, the future of work is going to be getting the law students or getting people on the law and policy side to develop a common language with the builders, the data scientists, the computer science people. They need to learn how to talk to each other at an earlier stage, because technology is always going to move faster than the law will be able to keep up and regulate it. And so good governance principles start at those early stages in my mind. And I was talking with an alum of ours. His name is Sean Perryman, and he is now the head of algorithmic fairness at Uber. I'm talking to him about potentially developing a course around AI governance and algorithmic fairness. And and he was just telling me, all day I'm just a translator. I'm just a translator between the two sides. And the law people too often just don't know what they don't know. My goal with our students is, like, I'm not going to turn out machine learning experts in the short amount of time we have them in law school. But if I could get them to just know what they don't know rather than, and frankly, a paradigm shift.
And who to ask, because they would have already been introduced to those people, right? So, yeah, critically important.
And I think, with the tools that we have and the learning by building concepts we get to do, you can kind of reach out and touch that in a way that used to be more academic. And now we can really you can go build and think through those problem points a little more, because some of the barriers to entry are coming down and have been abstracted away, and you can focus on the actual issues that you want to focus on it. So that has been a blessing, the way generative AI is starting to be deployed. It's not just chatbots anymore, right? There's all kinds of different methods itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost starting to become a measure of the maturity of your AI adoption, isn't it? That you've moved away from just chatbots, and it's Sigma integration, augmentation. I guess we're going to debate that word as well. But let me ask you this question: irrespective of whether a tech competency is mandated, so just taking that off the table for a second. do you think that we have right now kind of reached the point for, and I'm going to focus on lawyers in particular here, where having that level that you were speaking about of digital, and I think we have to say data literacy. I think they have to go together. Do you think we are on a must-have now, that it's not negotiable, that really everybody has got to engage and get to some foundational level of knowledge?
Yeah, you know, some days I think that, and some days I wonder. um, I think there's the one thing I don't know that we're there yet, but I will say I haven't seen, at least in the States, our profession snap to attention to that idea and wonder about it out loud in the way that generative AI has forced people to do that.
Yeah.
Is it previously with, we're still arguing about, whether cloud computing is safe. So we've still got a ways to go. But I feel like everybody understood text and everybody understood words, and they saw this, and they've seen the mistakes that have been made by people who didn't have that competency or curiosity or that literacy, and have started to, I think you're going to see more and more of it. I think we've got 40 states in the U.S. that have some kind of that have adopted that comment 8 like core tech requirement. That gets interpreted in different ways. But that's happened in like 10 years. So 40 states in 10 years is pretty good. Because that's the other complicating factor in the States is we've got 50 little fiefdom that decide what the rules are. Uh, but yeah, I think, what's interesting is young students, when I talk to them, are really open and curious and are headed down that path. And then the older group, the older attorneys who are seem to be like would be out the door in a few years, they're very curious and open and willing. It's the middle group that is maybe been a little bit more resistant, maybe like the Gen X, I would say, that are like, they're still young, but they've been around long enough to be set in the old way of doing things, and they've been old on the change. And I'm making broad generalizations, so they're certainly not universally true, but it's been my anecdotal experience that is often how it breaks down. But the thing about these tools is I think it's gonna, and why the legal field has snapped to attention so much is that it doesn't care whether we think it should be a core requirement or not. It's gonna force you to be, is all knowledge workers to be,
Yes.
whether you like it or
Yeah, and I think, look, legal is in one profession in the world. If all of our clients are embracing these tools, we simply won't be able to communicate with them. They literally won't be able to afford to instruct us if we don't get with the program, so to speak, right? Yeah, yeah.
yes.
I was thinking about, your students, the folks that'll graduate from your lab, and the skill set that they will have to bring to the industry. And I'm wondering whether we're reaching a situation where folks like them will look at, let's say, a more traditional law firm and say, no, thank you. I need to go and work somewhere else because it's too frustrating for me to work here. But also from those firms that have moved ahead, that they are looking back on the grads that they want to employ, and they want grads from your lab because it's really critical for all the things we were just discussing, that is the skill set that they're bringing in or expanding in their practice. And so I wonder, where does all of that sit at the moment in terms of choice of employer, but choice by employer as well?
Right. Yeah, I think for right now, with the way we're seeing it, and we're only a year old, but yeah, especially at Vanderbilt, like our students tend to go to, the top, 100, 200 firms, and they will do sort of M&A transactional style work, but they will go to the, big law. I don't know that I've seen a change in that yet. But I will say, we just had a student, his name's Jared Bauman, who graduated. He took our first AI and legal practice course in the fall of 2023. And he just joined the AI, his firm's a new AI practice group. And he credited Vail with putting him on that path. And I am definitely hopeful that we're creating a generation of students who could potentially find themselves, whether it's in leadership or participating in the decision-making process at an earlier stage, because they are equipped to help contribute to their firms on AI policy and use, more than it would be for an opportunity to get their foot in the door in those kind of leadership positions earlier than pretty much any other type of opportunity they could have had. So I think that's unique, and we've already seen a couple of students that, like Jared being first and foremost, who have taken advantage of that and have opened them up to, oh, this can be not just you use it, but this can be a thing that could be a career. And I'm hoping with some of the partnerships that we're doing around governance and regulation frameworks that, every day the job boards around AI governance and policy, they're tremendous. They're all over every day. That is it. Just that is a career path that is maybe non-traditional that some of them could take. We do have a couple of the students who are former alums who graduated pre-Vail, but have come back and are doing short courses that are part of our curriculum, and have kind of taken that path. They started in big law and then moved. One is working at Amazon, I believe, and the other one works for a quantum computing company. But they both started in big law. But really, that's more credit to they came through the program on law and innovation, which Kat is a part of, and Professor J.B. Rule was the director of that program, and through the curriculum that they had developed. But it is interesting to see them come back, and now they're going to be the professors as well.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, and it has been interesting to see those practice areas start to evolve. They seem to be, maybe I'm just looking for them more, but they seem to have been more prevalent in the last year or so, that they have just, you can actually identify them. Mark, sadly, I have to wrap up, but I'm not going to let you escape quite yet. I want to wrap up with one more question, if I may, and it's somewhat reflective. Yeah, as you think about the work that you're doing at the law school with your students as an educator, do you think that we've reached a point at the moment where we are on the road, clearly a long way still to go, for a very different type of legal practice? And I guess the other part of that is, if you're on the road or you want to get on the road, what should you be thinking about in this area right now?
Yeah, again, it's one of those. It depends on the day how I feel about that. I do. And I kind of said this before, but it also applies to this. I've never seen a technology force people's hand to think about alternative ways of legal services delivery. The billable hour is a very durable model. I used to having you in one of those early law practice technology courses that I would co-teach and be a part of. We had alternative fee arrangements as part of the curriculum, and we quickly discarded that because it just wasn't getting the traction we thought it would. It's not that they didn't exist, but it's just like it certainly didn't take over, right?
Yeah.
But I've never seen people, whether they're Gen AI skeptics, enthusiasts, or everywhere in between, I've never seen the profession sort of wonder out loud and contemplate the issue more than now. And you're seeing, and I think the next 5 years are going to be really interesting to watch to see how these models break up, sort of shake out, particularly at the sort of mid and lower, size firms, the more nimble and agile firms that are able to move a little bit more quickly. And then, that whole sort of dynamic, corporate counsel, in-house counsel talking to those firms as well, where those corporate counsel are cost centers and they're, very incentivized to be faster, and whereas, the billable hour, not so much. That dynamic I think is going to be really interesting to watch play out. So I think it's just not going to have a choice. It's going to be, and eventually we will get there. But yeah, we are unique, especially at least in America, where we kind of get to draw the moat around our profession and get to decide what the rules are. And so that slows that, a lot of these things are policy choices that don't have anything to do with technology or not, that are beyond the scope of what I'm capable of predicting. But I do think that this is going forward.
If you're still hesitant, if you're still sitting on the fence and you haven't jumped in, perhaps now with the benefit of hindsight, where do you start?
Where do you start? I think the number one thing that, and this is hard for people in the legal profession because we're sort of a risk averse people. We went to law school, sometimes because we just didn't know what else to do. The number one thing right now is just a curiosity and an open mind and a willingness to experiment. And I often instruct people to spend 10 to 12 hours messing around with these tools and truly messing around. Don't think about work right away. Because everybody first goes into like, let's go, can it do what I do? Can it do this task? Can it do set that aside and just intentional play. And through that, to those 10 or 12 hours of experimentation, you start to naturally think about ways that it fits into what you might do, because these systems are, again, they're weird. They behave differently than any other sort of tool we've been exposed to before. Again, they're kind of it's a discovery, not an invention, and so it behaves in that way. And so intentional play, curiosity, and then just getting yourself enough. And this is with my students, is learning how to keep learning about it. Continuous education. I first class, whether it's my law practice technology course or any of my AI courses, I tell them like right away, like half of the stuff, substantive material we're going to cover in this course right now is going to be irrelevant in 5 years. What you're here to learn about is how to keep learning about this stuff and to keep evolving over time. And it's unfortunate, but too often there's a mindset of, well, I've went here, I learned this, and so I'm done. I know it. I learned it, and that's just not how anything works. But particularly in something as fast moving as AI, that's really not how it works. So curiosity and learning how to learn about it, and there's lots of different layers of complication as to how we go about doing that. But that's the core mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And that we are in a brave new world. We're used to changes in the law, as you were saying earlier, moving a lot slower. This is a pace of change, I think, also that we're not quite used to, but have to get used to as well. Yeah. Mark, thank you so much for an amazing conversation and discussion.
Thank you.
Huge congratulations again on what you're doing at the lab. It's just amazing. And I'm looking forward to being a diligent student when I get to those courses as well. Thank you very much again. A pleasure.
Thank you. It's been an honor. I've had a great time.